I was asked when I came here to Asilomar, so last year you showed the Minority Report. Are you going to bring robots this time, or what's it going to be? But actually, I'm going to focus on stuff that is, really on the agenda of our customers, and actually something that is out there and used already quite a bit. So before getting into the topic, who is Signavio, for those of you who don't know us? So we're specializing on business process modeling. We only do that, so we have the Signavio process editor as our own product, as our only product. Quite a fast-growing company. We're serving around 500 customers, mid-size and large companies today, based out of Germany, California, and Asia. So this is actually a picture of our team. So if you ever run into one of those guys, that's the crazy ones behind Signavio. So what is our main business? The main business as a business process analysis tool vendor is, of course, to help people understand their process, facilitate discussion around it, and conceive change for their processes, and then being able to enable implementing that change in the organization on the one hand, and implementing that change in technology on the other hand. So the typical modules or components that you'll find in Signavio is one, the areas where you basically capture knowledge through BPMN modeling or other things. Then a collaboration environment about discussing change, discussing process improvement potential, and then publishing that or educating the organization about change in the process. So there's a portal component that is typically rolled out to everybody in the organization where you can look up what your particular part of the process is or what changed in the last 3 months. Add or see details like videos, what we've shown in a previous presentation, or other material in that portal. And the other dimension, implementing, of course, going down the BPMN path of using those models for implementing it, for example, in Effective, what we've seen earlier, or Camunda, or SAP, for example. That's 3 companies we work with very, very closely. So the main theme in that whole process area is typically to bridge the gap between creating traction, so getting people involved, getting people interested, getting people motivated to contribute their ideas. So basically fostering collaboration, making it usable to many people, but not to drown in chaos and many, many ideas out there that are not actionable or that don't lead to any change, but also then to guide the process towards a new state in your process architecture, to consolidate things, to organize things, to govern change. Also aspects like process variance. So you might conceive a process change. Does it apply to my organization globally? Does it only apply to certain product lines or certain locations? That's all the questions you ask yourself when talking about a process architecture, and not only a one chunk of or one chain of activities. Okay, so this is basically our daily business, and the typical people we talk to is those two groups. So line of business managers or process owners. Who have the challenge to make their customers happy, generate more revenue, or increase margins for the company, and using a process-oriented perspective to achieve that. So head of sales, for example, who has a broken sales process or has the opinion that things can be improved to smoothen the operations in the sales department, would use Signavio to do exactly that. Or central functions in the organization, like business process centers of excellence, who basically drive the BPM capabilities across the organization, provide process governance, and support the LOBs and the process owners in going about this process exercise. So this is the people we typically talk to and mostly talk to in the past. But interestingly enough, in the past months and not so many years, because the company is not so old anyway, we have 2 new target groups, actually, that got very interested in the process notion. So one is IT application owners. They have the challenge that they want to, or have to deliver the right application, actually, to the business. It's not so easy, not so trivial. They want to leverage standard functionality. So let's assume it's an SAP SCM system, for example. And of course, they want to leverage what is there as much as possible, because that reduces cost for custom coding. And also, they want to leverage what the vendors provide them with upgrades. So if a cool new thing is there in a new version of an application, they want to be able to roll that out and make the business hopefully happy with that. And of course, ensure system performance so that systems are up and running and enable business and not keep them from working. And the other function, like central IT roles like CIOs or enterprise architects working for the CIO, they have the challenge that they have to manage complex application portfolios. Their goal is to increase the agility of the organization. So when innovation transformation happens, that the application portfolio, application architecture doesn't stand against it, but rather enables that. But they're under constant cost pressure or rationalization pressure under which they have to work. So, and these people are actually they got very interested in the whole BPM notion. So BPM has become, at least among our clients, as an accelerator for those two disciplines, like enterprise architecture management, the upper one, and application lifecycle management on the lower one. Why is that so? So manage complex application portfolio. You need to get the business input about what these applications are actually used for, what's the context, and the process typically provides the context for understanding that. Also to understand the interfaces or touch points between applications, because you only can understand that once you've understood the process. Then to know what are actually our areas of differentiation, where's areas of efficiency. That, of course, impacts a lot about how your enterprise architecture has to look like, or the application portfolio. And what's actually the priorities? So if I'm talking about rationalization or cost pressure, well, I have to cut off things, right? So I have to get rid of things or consolidate things. And whenever shutting things off, that's always the hard part. How does it actually affect the processes? What is acceptable? And where am I working against the core value of the organization? The application owners, how can they benefit from the whole BPM exercise? Well, to deliver the right application, they have to know what the application actually is used for, right? So describing processes, but also to enable end-to-end testing across applications. That's quite a challenging thing. And only through the processes, you basically get the scope for doing that end-to-end testing. What's the impact on processes, or what's, again, the priority of processes? That's, again, very, very important once you want to leverage what is there as a standard or what is there as upgrade potential for an application. And then, of course, system performance highly depends on what are actually my business critical or mission critical areas. What is areas that, where a certain stop or a certain decreased performance is actually not so bad. Okay, so now it comes to tooling, because we're a tooling vendor. What does that mean for us? And the discussion we typically have with customers is, does actually a unified tooling make sense? So do I want to have an all-in-one solution for covering the process aspects, but also covering the enterprise architecture and application lifecycle management aspects? Or do I rather go about a best-of-breed approach where I use multiple tools? And then the question is, how do they actually work together? So on the one hand, I would have a unified repository with a pretty exhaustive meta model. Nice thing is I have a unified lifecycle for the knowledge I have in there, and unified governance. But yeah, so it's to give you the short answer, so Signavio is not going in that direction. So we're just doing a couple of low-hanging fruits. So for not so demanding use cases, we can provide an all-in-one thing. But for most cases, we actually go down a road of best of breed, where the question is, what is actually the overlap of the different repositories that I'm talking about? how do I synchronize, how do I push knowledge back and forth, actually. And things like, what is actually the owning application for certain knowledge, so having kind of master-slave relationships on certain types of information, and then implementing that or ensuring that in the synchronization mechanisms in place. Just to give you two examples of systems we integrate with. So here's one sorry, it's a German screenshot. A very good-looking one. This is the SAP Solution Manager, a very powerful tool for application lifecycle management. It actually tells you about all the transactions, well, that's the SAP speak for functions, all the IT functions you actually have in use. So if you want to get a complete picture about your SAP landscape, you simply have to switch on logging, and then based on the logs, the Solution Manager will tell you, what are the modules that you have running, what are the functions that you have running, what's the distribution, what is used more often or not. And actually, the Solution Manager is built in a process-oriented way, but doesn't have a graphical interface to it. So using something like Signavio on top of it is like an obvious choice. Another tool, which I'm going to use also in the demo, is like a very lightweight enterprise architecture management tool called LeanIX. They do these types of things, right? So the CIOs typically want these fancy reports about like heat maps highlighting certain aspects about your application portfolio, or roadmaps, or how IT projects affect the life cycle of applications in your organization, or how the cost structure is, for example, for your IT portfolio. Yeah, so enough said on the PowerPoint side of things. So I'll jump right into the demo and show it. Okay, so I'll actually start in Signavio. So this is the Signavio tool for those of you who haven't seen it. What you can do, you can basically describe processes on different levels. So from high-level process architectures through multiple levels. You typically then go down at some point to the BPMN level of things, where you start describing actually the activity flows and distribution to different people, and information flow, and IT system usage for tasks, and so on and so on. Okay, so what we've added actually since the last presentation is we were asking ourselves, many people asked us, well, if I want to go beyond process, and I want to model that, so far you could configure all kinds of things, but they wanted to graphically display things. So we were long looking for the proper, I have internet connection, the proper graphical representation. So we're always big fans of standards and things that are open out there. So we basically established Archimate, which is what BPMN is for process modeling. Archimate is basically an open standard for enterprise architecture modeling. So we included that as the second major notation or modeling language inside of the tool. So here, for example, you see a depiction of a simple application portfolio. These objects you would find in the Signavio repository, so you can reuse them in BPMN, for example. Or other diagrams. Oftentimes, this is like a data-centric perspective. So for example, in a data privacy-like question, you would ask, where do I actually use my lead data, and who accesses it? So you would have, so the blue stuff in Archimate is the application layer, the yellow stuff is the business layer. So these types of things you can now build, and it's through the object repository connected to what you do in BPMN. So you can reuse the systems, you can reuse information objects, you can reuse like roles or organizational units. And then here, obviously, you're relating it to either individual processes, or here we have like process areas from the process architecture. So you can basically trace. At the moment, you have to manually create those diagrams. So of course, you can use the object repository. But what we're building at the moment is that you can derive information that you have in other models, so that you can pre-populate at least parts of models from the existing documentation. So for example, if you have BPMN diagrams that use this lead data, you can then, basically the system tells you where it's used and then fills you an Archimate model with that information. Okay, so this is like the Archimate side of things. So everybody who's using Signavio can now use this as well to basically complement the process modeling part of things. But now going into a small demo of how an integration could look like in this best-of-breed approach. And here I'm using this LeanIX system. So it's basically, how does it look like? You have certain things that you consider typically in these EA tools. So most importantly is applications, but you can also have projects at least named in here, and the dependencies. Well, then you can go down to IT components, providers, or technological components. So let me quickly add a new system, which I'm going to use in a later example, inventory management system, for example. I'm going to use that later on. I'm going to create an application. And this system basically gives you all kinds of reporting that your CIO or your enterprise architectures would want to see. For example, here you see a application roadmap where you see when is the phase in, phase out, or active usage of certain systems. So for example, you see here that we recently exchanged our SharePoint infrastructure by Google Drive infrastructure. And that's what you can plan and see in these types of tools. Okay, coming back to the this object, where was it? Inventory management system. So I can basically, there's a built-in connector between these two systems. LeanIX, it's both cloud-based systems. And you basically have to put in your credentials once, and then you can decide what level of synchronization you want to have and what objects are governed where. Once you have that, you can basically, every couple of minutes or so, it does a synchronization anyway. For the demo, I just trigger it manually. And then on the Signavio side of things, you can use that for process modeling. So I can show that real quick. So here's functionality quick model. I think I showed that last time already, which goes into the direction of the wizard-based process modeling, also what we've seen earlier. So like an order to cash process, which starts with order received and cash collected is the desired endpoint. And what am I going to do? I can do check order, and who's that? That's the sales rep who matches orders against quotations, for example. And now you can reuse the systems from your repository. As I said in this example, I configured it in a way that the EA tool is basically driving the knowledge about the application portfolio. And then here, for example, what's the next step? Ship goods. That's done in the warehouse. And that uses my inventory management system. And create invoice or issue invoice. That's done in the finance department, and collect cash, collect payment. Okay, so I see down here that the BPMN is being generated. For those of you who ask themselves, what is this icon for? It's something we invented, and where we're using the extension mechanism of BPMN. But it's very widely used, so like 95% of our customers are using this extension because they simply use lanes for the organizational perspective and those satellite-type nodes for the application dimension of things. Okay, so this is how we can use it. Let me, in the graphical editor, quickly develop it a little bit further. Okay, the internet is slow, obviously. It's coming, it's coming. So what I'm going to do now is just maybe introduce a thing which is, so basically in the case where the goods are not on stock, I might want to procure it first. Procure items. So on stock. oops, no, and then yes down. Okay, that's my procurement. This is my company. And then I save it. And the nice thing about this is once it's in the repository and the synchronization runs through the next time, actually these processes are also inserted or at least referenced in this enterprise architecture system. So you can see down here processes, business support. So what business functions does this support? So it will show you an image here, and you can click on it and you go to the Signavio system directly because it knows where it is. Okay, so this is a way how you can imagine how EA type tools and a BPM tool like Signavio can work together, depending on how you set it up in terms of who owns what and what's the governance around it. So the last thing I want to show is going into the direction of governance a little bit further, continuing on the earlier presentation on effective. So of course, we're using effective ourselves in many ways. So one is that you can put items in your repository through approval workflows. I'm going to do that real quick. I hope everything works. Okay, I'm starting the workflow. So what it basically does is you can configure in BPMN approval workflows on the effective side, and it's fully integrated with the Signavio repository. So this is basically in the data storage effective works on, and effective controls the tasks to be done, and the status basically you're running through. So you see here, again, the document was referenced. So you see a small picture here of the process. And you can, I don't have any assignments here in this process, but for example, first step might be a formal approval. You get a little bit more information. So for example, you could check out what has changed since the last time. So you basically get a link back to Signavio showing you a comparison. So you see, what changes over time. At some point, we're going to integrate it fully in here, like as a widget, but for the time being, it's like realized through a link and then opening a new window. Okay, and then basically, let's say we reject it, and we haven't foreseen any comment here. So back in Signavio, you would see actually the states. You can select icons for the different states models or other items run through. So here you would see that, for example, this model was rejected for some reason, and you can follow. Let's see if this one. Yeah, so you have also like an activity feed or stream, what happens with things. So you see that it went through an approval workflow, actually twice because I tried it earlier. Then you can react on it and do further actions. Just to show you, last thing I want to show is how the approval workflow actually looks like. We've seen it a little bit earlier with the effective demo. But one thing Tom actually didn't show was that beyond the user tasks and JavaScript tasks, you have all kinds of pre-configured tasks for cloud systems. So for example, for being able to work with Google Drive or Salesforce. And one of them is Signavio, and then it basically lists you with the actions for that particular service that you can do. And how this works is that versions of items in the Signavio repository have a certain state or flag, and you can basically change that state from within this process, and then it looks like this. So here's an activity called set state to in progress, and you basically see the configured states a model or object item can be in, and as part of the approval process, you could do that. So last thing I show is the BPMN logic behind this. So we've seen there was an approve and reject path. Come on. Load it, please. Give me some bytes. Yeah. So this is how the approval workflow looks like. So basically, when you start it, it's the model or the item is put into state in progress, and then you have this human task called a formal approval. depending on the outcome, you put it to rejected or you pass it on. And this is, there's also special states something can be in. There's a special state called published. So when you set something to published, then you basically take that item in the repository and it will appear in the process portal, right? So the full life cycle, basically, things can go through. You can do that through this approval workflow. Okay, so that's my demo. Thanks for watching, and I'm happy to have the questions.